be placed up on the Greece Historical Society's website later this week. A few housekeeping notices. During the presentation, your video will be turned off and your mic will be turned off, just so the presenter won't be interrupted. If you do have a question, at the bottom of your screen is a chat button. If you open that up and send your chat to everyone, I will see the question and then send it to the speaker at the end of the presentation. All right. Couple of library related things. Our hours, we are open to the public. We are open Mondays and Tuesdays, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. Wednesdays, we are closed to the public. Thursday, we are open 12 to 7. Fridays, we are open 10 to 5. And Saturdays, we are now open 10 to 2. We have a lot of online book clubs. We have some adult DIY crafts. And we now just started, people can fax, scan, and print at the library. So I will take it away while I will turn it over to Bill.
Hello, I'm Bill Sowers. I'm the president of the Greece Historical Society. Some say the highest paid volunteer there. Just want to tell you what's coming up. Next June, actually, we're quite busy. We are going to have a Zoom Tuesday night, June 8th program, and it's called Researching Your Town of Greece Family with Marie Poignan and Joanne Warren-Snyder and Barb Kohler from the Rochester Local History and Genealogy Department. And we're preparing a book on pioneer families of Greece, and they will talk about how you can find your parent and how they can help you. That's going to be on June 8th. And then in June, we're going to move outside. We're going to have 2 outdoor programs, kind of like bring your own lawn chair. On Saturday, June 9th, we're going to have the history of the flower industry in Western New York with Nellie Gardner. And on Sunday, June 27th, outdoors, we're going to have David Coons talk. His title is Grandfather's Stories, and he's going to tell stories from his grandfather and how you should share your stories with your family. So that's what's coming up. And we are open on Sunday afternoons. We are closed Memorial Day weekend, and we are closed Father's Day, and we will also be closed on July 4th. Other than that, we're open every Sunday. So tonight, I'd like to introduce Kathleen Britton. She received her bachelor's in anthropology and history from St. John Fisher College and an MA in classical archaeology from the University Albany, SUNY Albany, and a New York State certificate in museum studies from New York University. Following a time at Seneca Falls Historical Society, she began a contract position with the Baker Cedarburg Museum and Archives, now known as the Rochester Medical Museum and Archives. The contract position evolved into a position of curator of collections, followed by stints as interim director and her present position as curator. With an eclectic historical interest in healthcare industry, she has done research, has included the United States Cadet Nursing Corps in World War II, the role of women in the founding of Rochester's original hospitals, early nursing early nursing history, and other aspects of history of Rochester Regional Health. So please welcome Kathy Britton. You can clap or whatever, but there is reactions. There's a clapping thing you can do if you want, but Kathleen, please take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Bill, for having me tonight, and truly for kind of giving me the kick in the pants to start working a little bit more on the history of Park Avenue, Park Ridge Unity Hospital. Couple little disclaimers as I get into this. We are Rochester Medical Museum and Archives is part of Rochester Regional Health, and we are basically the Oh, we're basically a historical society that's attached to a healthcare system, and we also function as a corporate archive. So we're the memory bank for the system. We're a very small department. There are only 2 of us, and for the last year, I have been pretty much the only person who's in there at any given time, and that's sporadic at best. So even though we've had the Unity collection for about 5 years now, but because of the small size, so far, the only part that we've really gotten organized has been the documents. So there are a few slides in this program where I don't have as many photos as I would like, or the photos might have a kind of strange tinge to them because I use the newsletter photos from the time, and the newsletters were on either green or yellow paper. So, if there's a tinge, remember the source. There'll be, excuse me, we'll do question and answer afterwards. I'll do my best to answer, and if I don't have an answer for me and you're really interested, you can shoot me an email and I'll see what I can find out for you. One housekeeping note from my end, the Rochester Medical Museum and Archives, we are hosting a program tomorrow night about Lillian Wald. If any of you are interested in that, you can email me and I'll give that address out at the end, and I'll get you signed up and send you out the link tomorrow. So anyway, tonight I'm going to talk about establishing the Park Avenue Hospital downtown and then moving it out to Long Pond Road. So let's get started here. And hopefully it worked. There we go. Okay, so in 1894, Dr. John F.W. Whitbeck, who is the gentleman with the big mustache in the lower left corner, was a surgeon at Rochester City Hospital, and he wanted to establish his own hospital. So he broke ground in 1894 for a private hospital at the corner of Park Avenue and Brunswick Street. The building would have 3 stories and 25 beds and was later known as Dr. Whitbeck's Hospital. Unfortunately, it closed in 1904, and Dr. Whitbeck leased the property to a gentleman named J. Howard Broadstreet, who opened a private school for boys in the building. That school didn't last too long either. In 1907, Dr. Charles Barber, who is the gentleman in the upper right corner, purchased the property from Dr. Whitbeck and renovated it into the 40-bed Park Avenue Hospital, and that's the building that you see in the upper left corner. 1908, the School of Nursing was started. It was a diploma school, and it had a 3-year program, so its first class graduated in 1911, and those are the lovely ladies that you see in the bottom right corner. We do have a fairly good number of photographs of the nursing classes from the school. Some of the notes that I saw showed that there was a graduating class every year through 1949, with the exception of, I think it was 1923, when there were maybe all of 2 girls in the class and they were both sick, so they didn't have a ceremony. Expansion and growth on Park Avenue. The picture that you're seeing here is probably from judging by the uniforms, probably from about the 30s. And it's a hallway, obviously. So this was what I could find. It's a neat photo. I found it today and I really liked it, so I wanted to share. There was a lot of growth for the hospital between the 1920s through the 40s. The end of December in 1920, Dr. Barber formed a membership corporation to share the responsibility of running the hospital with other physicians. This incorporation was approved by the New York State Board of Charities on January 18th, 1921, under the name of Park Avenue Clinical Hospital. 5 years later, the hospital's name changed again, and this time it became the Park Avenue Hospital Incorporated. In 1921, there was more building that happened. There was a 50-room wing, new 50-room wing that was built. And on completion, this wing raised the bed count to 103 beds, 85 for adults and 18 bassinets. And it was the first fireproof wing east of the Mississippi River. In 1923, there were purchases made, 1923 and 1924, purchases were made of properties alongside the hospital, which were then renovated and became nurses' homes. So the nursing staff had essentially dormitories where they were able to stay. Probably the students lived there also. A home for supervisors was built on hospital property in 1926. This is a picture, I really wish I had been able to find it. I'm going to have to keep looking for it. In 1925, the hospital purchased its first motorized ambulance, which was a white Cunningham ambulance. So it was a local product. Edwin Range was the driver for its first emergency run, and he remained as the ambulance driver for more than 25 years. In 1929, the office building that had been used by Drs. Whitbeck and Barber was renovated to create the education building. And this building contained science and diet laboratories in the basement, classrooms, a reference library, and instructors' offices on the first floor, and clinical areas, including hospital beds, life-size mannequins, utility rooms, and a medical closet upstairs. 1929 was also the year that the Park Avenue Women's Auxiliary was organized, and their function at the time was to make hospital supplies, serve as volunteer aides, and raise money for new equipment and other improvements. Between 1937 and 1942, all of the kitchens were remodeled and re-equipped, and the entire hospital was refurnished. New x-ray equipment was purchased, and the two x-ray rooms that were original to the hospital were combined to form one new one. Additional remodeling of the hospital building in 1943 created semi-private rooms and increased the bed count to 112. The source that I was using was really very meticulous about tracking the bed count, so that's going to pop up periodically, but it's a nice way of seeing how capacity was growing. So now we're up to post-war, and shortly after the war was done, there was the civic committee that was founded to study the situation of hospitals in the Rochester area. Over the course of several studies, the committee identified needed upgrades at the different hospitals, recommended methods of cooperation, consolidation and mergers, and surveyed community resources in an effort to project healthcare needs for the future. And this committee is going to be something that is pretty important through easily up through the 1970s. In December of 46, the name changed to the Rochester Hospital Fund, and it had the goal of facilitating the major renovations and constructions needed in the city that had been identified by the Civic Committee. Half of the population, the local population, lived north of Main Street, and the lakeside suburbs were growing. Both groups believed that a new hospital on the north side of the city was needed. So fundraising began in November of 1948 and brought in close to $7.5 million, of which $1,420,000 was allotted to the new North Side Hospital, with $250,000 held in reserve for expenses. The new hospital will be built at the corner of Hudson Avenue and Ridge Road East. Since RGH had been providing house officers and lab services to Park Avenue for several years, the powers that be decided that these organizations should merge to form the new Northside Hospital. And that is the image that you're seeing on the screen now. It's the architect's rendering, and the hospital was going to be called the North Park Hospital. And you can see the name above it's just about in the center. You see where that roundish shape is behind the bus. You can see the name of the hospital above the doorway there. So Park Avenue's buildings would be sold to help fund renovations to the RGH campus on West Main Street. And that campus would become a center focusing on chronic care, physical medicine, and alcoholism. Also, as part of this plan, the Park Avenue Hospital School of Nursing was consolidated with RGH's school. Physicians at both hospitals were granted reciprocal privileges, and the merger was approved by New York State in the summer of 1952. Unfortunately, the plan did not last. It was an uneasy merger for both organizations from the building. Neither one was really quite comfortable with the situation. So by November of 52, the merger dissolved over administrative differences. Park Avenue Hospital planned to continue in their current location, and RGH would go on to operate both the North Side and West Side divisions until they consolidated in 1967 on Portland Avenue. So once the decision was made to stay on Park Avenue, there were more renovations that occurred to make the best use of the property. The education building was renovated again and created an emergency department on the first floor and sleeping quarters for the house officers on the second. The 1956 wing, also known as the West Wing, was opened in 1956. Wow. It added 52 beds and brought maintaining the current total of 112. Basically, they manipulated it through just reorganization, and also added a new surgical suite. The part that interests me the most, and I need to do some more research on it, is that in 1960, Park Avenue opened Monroe County's first intensive care unit, and that had 6 beds in it. That is something that I really want to track down some information about, because with it being the first one in the county, it would really be neat to see, you know, what services and advantages it provided. So that's just more of interest on my end. So now we're up to the 60s, and you know, the population in Monroe County is continuing to grow. And in 1961, the Greece Council of the Rochester Chamber of Commerce commissioned the Northwest Hospital Commission. This was originally comprised of Ralph DeStefano Sr., Fred Strauss, and Dr. Malcolm Waite. And they were commissioned to bring a hospital to the town of Greece because there wasn't anything out here. The population of Greece and Gates was rapidly growing at the time, and it also included a large number of young families. And there was no hospital to serve them between the Genesee River and Brockport. Additionally, one of the other factors that had been recognized was that the patient to physician ratio for the area was 1 physician to 3,600 patients, as opposed to the national average of 1 physician to 700 patients. So there was definitely a need on this side of the county. So Park Avenue Board of Directors had a lot of thinking to do. In April of 1964, they met with citizen committees from both Greece and Webster to discuss relocating the hospital to one of those suburbs. And later in June that year, they voted in favor of relocating pending financial support in the selected area. Notice they hadn't decided which area yet. February the following year, the Rochester Regional Hospital Council released survey findings that prompted the board of directors to reverse their earlier decision and began a plan of phased replacements and expansions that would bring the hospital's total bed count up to 200. The possibility of converting the hospital into an extended care facility was also considered. One thing that you have to remember, though, even with all of the renovations and replacements and expansions that they were talking about for Park Avenue, the building was still landlocked because it was right in the middle of the city. Where are you going to go? You're only going to be able to go up. It's kind of the same situation that Highland has now. And it was a similar situation to what RGH had on West Main Street. So, you know, how are you going to juggle this? How are you going to make it work in the neighborhood is, you know, definitely something that they would have had to have considered. Additionally, later on in 1965, after the board had decided to stay put, the Northwest Hospital Commission came back on behalf of the Greece Council and the citizens of Greece and presented a no strings attached deed to 156 acres of land on Long Pond Road near Ridgeway Avenue. And that is the photo that you see, and the larger color photo that you see there. That is the area that is where the current campus is built. This is the first photo that I've found of the bare land. So I thought that was kind of neat to get a look at it, because you can really see, just how big it was there. And I'd been told that there had been a farm there, and I can picture that now. I am a transplant to Rochester, so I've always known that area all built up around the hospital. So it was really kind of neat to see it in its original situation. In 1966, the Rochester Regional Hospital Council published another study entitled "The Study of Patient Usage Patterns and Projection of General Care Bed Needs" in April. And this was basically what finally settled all of the debates. This study showed the need for an acute general hospital in the northwest quadrant of Monroe County. And on July 20th, Park Avenue's board of directors voted to relocate to Greece, subject to approval from all appropriate planning agencies. This approval was granted on March 24th of 1967, following decisions from the Rochester Regional Hospital Council and the Health Council of Monroe County. The Public Health Council of the state of New York gave final approval on June 7th, 1971. So that meant that the Park Avenue Hospital would close and a new hospital would be built on Long Pond Road. So now we're getting up to where I've got a few more pictures. And this is also where the newsletter photos are going to come in. So I was having fun this morning finding everybody and getting them all organized. And it's neat to, I've heard stories about Dr. Hurst, so it's neat to finally get to a point where I'm, I guess you could say, meeting him in the historical record. So first part of the campus to be built was the Park Ridge Nursing Home. And that was essentially, well, not essentially, that was because mortgage funds for a nursing home became available first as opposed to the hospital. Construction began in 1971, and this was after the town of Greece had built a new sewage treatment system to help support the campus. Ground was broken for the nursing home on May 6th, and Robert Fellows was appointed as the administrator. In February of 72, Judith Yerman was introduced as the director of nursing for the nursing home, and later in July, Dr. Nathaniel Hurst was announced as the director of medical services, in addition to his duties as chair of the Department of Medicine at Park Avenue. The first patient at the nursing home was admitted on July 31st, 1972. And according to the July issue of Park Bench, which was the newsletter that was distributed throughout the hospital to its employees, this was the newest nursing home in Monroe County, and its care program was designed to emphasize rehabilitation for its residents through a wide range of facilities and therapeutic activities. Now, this is where it's kind of getting fun for me. One of the things that we do on the Archives Facebook page is we do kind of a look back, and it'll be 50 years ago for General Genesee and St. Mary's, and 45 years ago for, at this point, Park Ridge. I don't have newsletters going back 50 years for Park Avenue Hospital. So for the last year or so, the stories about Park Ridge have really focused on the construction and dedication and move-in to the new buildings. So it's been really neat to see a hospital grow, I guess is the best way to explain it. Groundbreaking for the new hospital occurred on November 13th, 1972. And that is the picture in the upper left corner. And in it, we see Dr. James Aquavella, who was the medical staff president, Arthur F. Gibson, who was the chairman of the board, and Ralph DiStefano, who was chair of the building committee. And they were all on hand to take up their spades and turn over the ground and get things rolling. Construction moved along very smoothly, and it incorporated a lot of modern features, some of which were single rooms, which had nursing alcoves. And this alcove was essentially a miniature nursing station for each patient, within that room. And it incorporated a telephone so that they could communicate with other departments, a pneumatic tube system for sending messages and small items to other parts of the hospital. And what I think is really neat, it was essentially kind of like a double-sided closet, and they called it a nurse server. And it opened into the hallway and allowed the alcove to be stocked with linens, medications, etc., without disturbing the patient in the room. They also had what was called the SPD building, and that housed dietary, pharmacy, purchasing, receiving, central stores, the print shop, employee lockers, boilers, and other maintenance and engineering areas. One of the things that I saw as I was pulling this all together was that the SPD building was also where crash carts and general supply carts were housed, and the carts would be sent out daily and returned, and anything that was either used up or out of date would be replaced, and everything would go back out the next day. I'm not quite sure what the distance involved was. That might have been a bit of a problem, but just the thought of having all of the support, I just lost my word, I'm sorry, all of the support departments housed in one area it makes a lot of sense to me. And that way you can maximize patient care in the main building. In April of 1973, Tim McCormick hits the stage. He was, and this is, we see him in the lower right corner, and this is a very young picture of him. He still has hair. He was hired on as the assistant administrator of Park Avenue and as the administrator of the nursing home. And we all know that Mr. McCormick stayed on with Park Ridge through its merger with St. Mary's to found Unity, the Unity system, and then through the merger with Rochester General Health to form Rochester Regional. I've had the opportunity recently, his daughter Kelly has now joined the Rochester Regional Health Foundations as its president. So I'm hoping that at some point in time, I'll be able to sit down with her and get some stories about her dad and his time at the hospital and in the system, because I never had a chance to sit down with him, and I'd love to hear those stories, and getting them from the kid's eye view would be kind of neat. Also in April of that year, the hospital took beneficial occupancy of the SPD building, which basically allowed them to finally get started on moving in. Housekeeping staff was able to begin cleaning. They were able to start moving in equipment and other supplies, and the staff could begin organizing their space in the building. So really, they're starting to gear up for the big move in and for the building going live. The pharmacy moved in to SPD in May, and food service was shortly thereafter. Full occupancy and use of the SPD building and possibly the basement of the hospital itself is anticipated for June 1st, with total occupancy of the entire hospital by mid-August, followed by its first admissions in the first or second week of September. The hospital opened for patients on September 7th, 1975. And it measured 260,000 square feet, had 234 beds, and expanded ambulatory physical therapy, mental health, and nuclear medicine services. And one of the things that I was finding as I was going along and doing this, putting this program together, I was able to track down a few of the donors, and this was kind of neat to me. Daisy Marquis Jones Foundation gave $1 million towards the building. The Park Ridge Auxiliary donated $25,000 to purchase televisions. And as I was making note of that, I'm thinking, okay, were they did they hang them from the ceiling, or were they, because these were the big heavy TVs from the mid-70s. So how did they accommodate those in their rooms? Greece Olympia High School donated $1,000 towards landscaping because that expense was not could not be part of the mortgage. Park Avenue Hospital Nursing School alumni donated $500. Gates Child Eyes graduating class of 1974 donated just under $710 to help equip the ED. And students at the Hoover Drive Junior High School in Greece donated $650 to purchase equipment for the cast room. There were a lot of other donors. These were just some of the ones that I thought were interesting. Just, they were neat to me. So now we're on to dedication day. And this was really, it was a big party. It was the culmination of a lot of hard work. This was September 5th, 1975. And the dedication program kicked off with a welcome from Henry R. Dutcher, who was the president of the board of directors, and comments by Arthur Gibson, who was the board chair, and Charles J. Avalon, who was president of the medical and dental staff. After the key to the new hospital was presented, Congressman Barbara Conable introduced the Vice President of the United States, Nelson Rockefeller. And at the time that all of the approvals had been granted, Rockefeller was still governor of New York State, so it would have been all during, he would have had a hand in getting things rolling. And Congressman Conable was the representative for this area. He was out of Warsaw, I believe I read. There was an open house which followed the ceremony, and hospital staff members were stationed in their departments to answer questions from those touring the new buildings. Auxiliary members were there to help guide the guests, and the guests were able to see the entire hospital except for the third floor patient area because that was identical to the second floor area, so there was really no need to take them up. After visiting all of the departments, your tour ended in the cafeteria with refreshments. One of the things that I found out along the way as I was talking to people and reading, and I actually saw some photographs of it, which I didn't include in this, the day of the dedication and ribbon cutting was also the same day that an assassination attempt was made on President Ford out in San Francisco. So I've got a few pictures in the stash of guards on top of the hospital building who were there to protect the vice president. And from what I was told, he was rushed pretty quickly in and out. In the bottom right corner with Vice President Rockefeller, the gentleman on the left side of him is Don Riley, who was the supervisor of the town of Greece at the time. And the gentleman on the right is Mr. DiStefano. This is just neat. It would have been so, I would have loved to have been there, but I was only 5 and I lived outside of Elmira at the time, so it wouldn't have made sense. But I'd love to have been a fly on the wall and just, really kind of see what they were, what everything was doing and going on, and seeing how proud everybody was of what they had accomplished, because it's a big deal to build a hospital, which, yeah. So now we get to the end of this, we're getting to the end of this part of the story, and you kind of have to wonder what happened to the original hospital. The last elective admission at Park Avenue occurred on August 27th of 1975, and 2 days later, the ED and operating rooms closed and all admissions were terminated. On September 7th, only a few staff members reported to Park Avenue, and the rest reported directly to Park Ridge. At Park Avenue, ambulances that had been provided by the Greece Volunteer Ambulance Service lined up to help transfer the remaining 12 patients from Park Ave to Park Ridge. Nurses rode with each patient and helped settle them into their new rooms at the new hospital. The transfers were completed by noon, and the Park Avenue Hospital was no more. In the summer of '74, the Park Avenue Hospital buildings and properties have been sold to Omega Planners Incorporated. The sale of the properties relieved the hospital of maintenance costs after the relocation to Long Pond, as well as an anticipated expense of approximately $100,000 to demolish the place. It also allowed once the building was vacant, it would also be able to go back on the tax rolls for the city of Rochester. At the time of the sale, Omega Planners were not sure how they would use the property. They had originally intended to demolish the buildings and build an office apartment complex on the site. This plan didn't go into effect as the city zoning board denied the request for a zoning variance. The building remained vacant for several years, and then in 1977, it became the home of the Talmudical Institute of Upstate New York, which is a Jewish school for boys. As far as I know, that school is still in residence there. I know one of its neighbors within the building recently has been a fine lingerie boutique, which always has kind of struck me as a odd combination. One of the things that I want to go through and find out, just as much for my own edification as, just I think it would be interesting to know. I don't know who owns the building at this point. That would be interesting to know. I know it is still standing. Other than that, I'm not sure what else is going on with it or what shape it's in. That's pretty much what I have for the moment. At some point, I will take the research further. One of the things that I need to get done, we have timeline exhibits for the hospitals whose collections are in our care, and we need to get that done for Park Ridge and Unity, and so that's one of the next things. And this presentation will be a good jumping off point for that. We have a lot of work to do with the photograph collection. The photos need to be sorted and organized and people and events identified. If any of you have any sort of connection to the hospital, we'd love, we would love to have you as a volunteer. So you can give me an email or a call and we can talk about that. There are a lot of good stories in all of our hospitals, and I am really looking forward to getting to know Unity better and learning its stories. And if you have any that you would like to share, I'd love to hear them. So thank you for listening tonight, and I'll do my best to answer your questions. Thanks.
Thank you. That was fascinating. Okay, let's see here. Melinda said, what a great idea to ask his daughter to do an oral history. Having those firsthand accounts are invaluable.
Absolutely. You can only get so much from the documents and the photos. And I think a kid's perspective of, not necessarily a kid, but the perspective of, what your dad was doing, I think that would be a neat thing to have.
Definitely. Charles says he has recorded digital transcriptions of limited records, such as dates when related to his grandfather, Dr. Charles Leonard of Spencerport, who was chief of surgery and on the board of directors at Park Avenue.
Oh, neat.
Then he went to the University of Buffalo, where he served under Roswell. And then he left his email and phone number. So I'll copy those.
We'll have to get in contact.
Absolutely.
I'm do a lot of research. You said you were spent some time in Seneca Falls.
Yes.
Yes. I have an ancestor who's one of the signers, and I been doing a lot of research on the signers of the Declaration of Sentiments, Underground Railroad, and that I didn't know about that heritage that I didn't know until 2002. But I cut my teeth doing family records and things like that on my grandfather and my mother's Sutherland family in Pittsburgh. And I lost a lot of records in a fire and things like that. But because I did transcribe a lot of material into my computers, I was able to retain things that that put it more on a personal level. You do your contacts is about the buildings and organizations, things like that. Mine is more of the doctors themselves from 1915 to 1959 when my or 60, my grandfather was in medicine for 50 years, and he would have been he served in World War I, and I found out that he served over in France or over in Europe, so he would have faced the Spanish flu, being in the army at that time. So I don't know anything about that, but he would have been. He certainly had a demeanor and things like that carried over through his military activity that people just respected him, and he was well thought of, and he was regarded as one of the top doctors in the whole area. He was president of the New York Medical Society at one time, and and also
That's fantastic.
You're tied in with the museum in Rochester, right?
Yes.
I had donated in 2011.
I met you in front of the Ogden Library, didn't I?
It could be. It could be.
Okay.
So Charles,
yeah.
I sent Kathleen your contact information, so you guys
Right.
really get
Right.
connected.
Right.
Awesome.
So-
Thank you for sharing.
Right. We'll have to.
I have a couple more questions and comments, so I'm going to move on to those, and then if we have time at the end, you can add some more. How's that sound? All right. So Travis said he hasn't seen the inside of the hospital since 1995. Has it been totally renovated since? He recalls the distinct 1970s honeycomb lighted ceiling in the main lobby, and the old Park Avenue building is still the Jewish school and is now covered in ivy over most of the exterior, and that you can see it on Google Street View.
Okay. I know that they have done a lot of renovation work. There was the addition that was built in the early 2000s, and I don't believe the honeycomb ceiling is still there anymore. It looks like what I have seen of the interior of the hospital looks pretty modern and updated. Very subdued type, neutral palette, color palette, and I'm gonna have to do some more photo digging. It'll be interesting to see how it's changed over the years.
Yeah.
I can add some information to this. I'm Douglas Fisher. I live in the neighborhood, and the Talmudic Institute does still own the building and operate their school, but because of the COVID situation, they have been on hiatus over the past year, and they are not sure when they will reopen, but they do plan to. The lingerie shop closed about a year ago, and there's a sign out front of the building that that space is currently for rent.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
sure. So now, back in the 1970s, I knew Henry Dutcher very well at the time that, as you say, he was president of the hospital board. And he told me that the initial consideration for establishing a hospital on the west side involved applying to the state of New York for a hospital charter,
Mhm.
which would have been a very complicated and labyrinthine process, expensive, and would have taken easily a year. And somebody came up with the idea, well, Park Avenue Hospital already has a charter. Let's use that charter. And that's what they did. And Henry told me that it saved all that time and money
Yeah,
by being able to do that.
that makes total sense.
So another interesting little tidbit of trivia that I learned fairly recently. Many of you might remember the old Wyatt Earp television program, the Western of the 1950s, starring Hugh O'Brien. Hugh O'Brien was born in this Park Avenue Hospital building.
Neat.
If you guys want to, at this point, you can certainly start your video. If you go up to your, if you want to be seen, that's certainly fine.
Well, it's still being blocked.
All right, I'll deal with that in just a moment, sir. From Christine, it says, I am Ralph DiStefano's granddaughter, and my mom is on this Zoom too. Maria Justice is Ralph's daughter. We have seen the growth every step of the way, and Maria has stories she can get to you.
I would love to talk with you both. That would be fabulous.
And Ralph DiStefano Jr. had planned to be here, but he had something came up at the last minute. He just called me and he could not join. He was quite disappointed. So he would have added some stories.
Well, I would love to get to sit down with all of you folks and to just listen. I love stories. That's the best part of this job to me, is hearing all the stories.
Gene Dupre here. I've got a little story too.
Okay.
We lived in the Park Avenue area, and a small group of people, including a couple of architects, got together to try to develop a plan for redevelopment of the old Park Avenue Hospital. Got through all the blueprints, never able to get the funding together to make it work, but it was going to be a mixed-use development. And the plan was to also work with the old transit barns, the old trolley barns that are adjacent to the property. And the real dreamers had ideas of opening up the rails that were still buried on Park Avenue and get a trolley from the Transportation Museum to operate between the Rochester Museum and Science Center, where I was working at the time, and the old Park Avenue parking lot to relieve some of the driving congestion and parking congestion along Park Avenue. A really interesting concept. Never got the funding to make it work, but I've got the blueprints hanging around somewhere. I'll try to dig those out for you.
That would be neat.
All right,
Hi,
any other
I'm-
questions?
I'm Maria Justice.
Hello.
Can I tell a real cute story? This is Maria Justice, Ralph's daughter. Can you
Absolutely.
hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. My dad was with the Rotary Club, and he started or was instrumental in starting the Grease Ambulance. And when he was working on the board to try and get the hospital moved to Long Pond Road versus on the other side of the city, he set up to have the Grease Ambulance go across the bridge, which is between Ridge Road heading over to Rochester General at the time, right in the middle of 5 o'clock traffic, Kodak traffic. He also hired an ambulance, a helicopter, this is a true story, to take a picture from up above. And so from the picture, you see Grease Ambulance stuck in the middle of traffic. There was no patient in it. Stuck in the middle of traffic with the lights on, heading supposedly to Rochester General. And he said to the committee there, see, look at this. This ambulance has got a Greece resident trying to go to Rochester General. We need a hospital in the town of Greece.
Didn't he also
And he
time
said
it?
one picture got
That
him a
is
lot of money.
brilliant.
Didn't he also time it so that a train would go by across Ridge Road to even hold up the traffic from that story that
He
felt-
might have done that as well.
yes,
That is
He
brilliant.
also,
Yeah,
he also contacted as many friends and business people that he could and asked them to drive back and forth over the bridge as many times as they could during that time frame to make it extra crowded to prove to the Greece Town Board and Greece.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Come
And
on.
actually, Tim McCormick told that story at his funeral several years ago.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's a fun story.
I
For
see
those
Tom
of you-
Riley is attending here. Tom Riley would likely have some interesting stories to relate.
Oh, there he
Yes.
is.
Yeah, he called me last week and is on my list to circle back to just what little bit he told me in our conversation. I'm intrigued. I can't wait to sit down with him.
Tom, you're on mute.
Anybody else have any other questions or stories they'd like to share?
Tom Riley is trying to talk, but he's got to.
I'm off mute, so I
Okay.
can say something. No, I found the entire presentation excellent, and I would only add that I lived through the entire story because I went on the board of Park Avenue Hospital in the late 60s, so participated with Henry Dutcher and of course, you know, the dear leader of our entire system, Art Gibson, when we went to Albany to petition the state to provide that charter. So I have the story firsthand through this entire period. So I can add a lot of color and also a lot of accuracy to the material that's been presented. I would just add one part. A lot of names, obviously, time doesn't permit to share them all that participated, but Ralph, Maria Justice, I want to add to the great theater that Ralph DiStefano put together to sell this. And that little bit about the train story, I can tell you is absolutely true. Because one, I sat having an ice cream in the store with a couple of Kodak executives, and it wasn't a real live train. He convinced Eastman Kodak Company to move one of its coal deliveries, which you all know the crossing right there at Ridge Road, and park it across Ridge Road during this period of time to stop those ambulances to get the photography right, to make sure this whole thing happened. Ralph, over banana splits in the store, was a master at putting the right theater together to sell the community on the necessity of having this hospital on the west side of the community. It was, you know, a real lesson in putting together the kind of theater that you see today sold in our business. Ralph had it all. He was a master at it. So,
That
you
is
know, God bless him.
brilliant.
And could I add that, speaking of Ralph, if you go on our website, Ralph DiStefano Jr., we have a talk. It's basically the history of Buckman's Dairy, but he does go into what his father did for the hospital. So if you want to hear more about Ralph, you can go on our website and look for that history of Buckman's Dairy story. That's a 1-hour video.
So there's a comment from Melinda that says, the story about the ambulance stuck in traffic makes it even more poignant about Lakeside closing. I remember feeling so anxious about having the closest hospital being so far away until U of R did Strong West.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Uh,
And one other thing that my dad insisted, and I believe it's in their rules or regulations in the hospital, is he felt there should never be any charge for parking
Yes.
for
yes.
the visitors, because he felt when they were going to the hospital, it was enough stress on them to visit loved ones who were ill. They did not have to be strapped with parking fees. And so you may well know that Park Ridge, or now Unity, is the only hospital that does not charge for parking. All the other hospitals you have to pay.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
he has that in their bylaws that they cannot charge for parking.
Hmm.
So
That's
kudos to
Another
Dad.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
All right, any other comments or questions anybody has or wants to share?
I just accidentally sent, I meant to send it to Kathy at the library, but I just sent my contact information to Gina. So I'll just say it out loud now. My direct email, if anybody wants to get a hold of me, is Kathleen.Britton, and it's Britton @rochesterregional.org. And the general archives email is archives@rochesterregional.org. So, you know, get a hold of me. I would love to hear more of these stories. And Tom and Maria, we need to talk.
We will. I wrote down your email.
Beautiful. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
So we have a couple other quick comments. Douglas says, supplementing my audio comment, Henry Dutcher had noted to me that the expediting of the state approval via using pre-existing Park Avenue Hospital charter saved substantial dollars that inflation would have imposed upon the Park Ridge construction. And Charles says, I have to marvel that my grandfather lived in Spencerport back in the day to travel to Park Avenue without 390 or 490 to do surgery.
Yeah.
Anything
Your
else?
medical museum is located in the Academy of Medicine building on East Avenue.
Yes, sir. We've been there since 2014.
Now, there used to be a Baker Cedarburg Archives over
That's
on,
us.
that's you. You moved from
That's-
Humboldt Street.
Yep, we finally escaped Humboldt. That was a very unique building. But no, now we're over on East Avenue. We have great off-street parking. We get to be in the beautiful Academy building, and the two organizations work very nicely together. We're serving essentially the same community, but we're coming at it from different angles. So, you know, we can help each other out and take care of folks all at the same time.
Wonderful.
Gene Dupre here again. I'm
Yes,
so
sir.
glad that Tom Riley was able to join us. He regaled me with some of these stories when he took me on a tour of Park Ridge. We just moved back to Rochester after being out of town for 35 years, trying to decide which hospital system we were going to be part of. Tom, of course, convinced me that it had to be Unity and Regional Health, but gave me the grand tour. And while we were on that tour and our drive out there, I heard many of these stories about how things move from Park Avenue to Park Ridge, and all of the color in between. So I said, Tom, you got to be part of this.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for twisting his arm.
I don't think you have to twist Tom's arm.
Probably
too much of
not,
anything.
And your comment about Grease Volunteer Ambulance, they are no longer in business. The Grease Volunteer Ambulance has been sold. The building on Long Pond has been sold.
Yeah.
And they are no longer in existence.
Well, who does provide ambulance service
Well,
now?
they sold out to another company.
Yeah.
There's another company that took their place, but it's a regional company that, you know, pretty soon everything will be owned by one company.
There was a movie about that once.
Yeah. I don't think they,
More companies.
I'm not sure if the ambulances themselves have been repainted yet. I don't, you know, I just don't know, but unfortunately, without local newspapers, we don't hear those stories. Is there any more questions? I want to invite everybody next month. Marie Poignant is on there over in the. She will be leading our next program next month on finding your roots. I guess is kind of the story, and we plan several things for the town's bicentennial. So, and just watch our Facebook page or our newsletter or our emails or our website for what we're doing. And Kathy at the library, you still there?
I'm here.
Are we all done? The only down in reactions, and it's kind of hard because we're not in really, but you can put your little hand clap to Kathleen. That's the best we can do.
Or we can do it live.
It's,
That's true. We could do it live.
yeah. Well,
Thank
someday we'll
you.
be all together in a
Yep.
in a
Thank you
room.
all for having me. This was fun.
And, you'll always learn something from this group too.
It is a nice collaborative effort between the presenter and the attendees who often have lots to share and contribute also. So
Yes. All right, we will, for your friends that couldn't make it, watch our website probably end of the week, first of next week, and we'll have it along with all our other programs that we have online. There's
Great.
on our website, it's a program under program archives. There's about 30 videos there, so this will be one of them.
fantastic.
Great.